a few times, we do know a lot of our smaller operators struggle in this area. It's quite difficult for them because it's changing so quickly. They don't have the resources of a corporate, so we're looking at how we can help those people actually deal with the changes in technology and the needs of social media. And people don't realise that when they're now in an environment where they've really got to sit on their website every day and update it with fresh content and fresh information. And I've spoken to tourism operators before that think, hang on a minute, I do my brochure once a year. No, it's got to be done. You need to almost spend 30 minutes a day on promoting and being in touch with your customers. And that's foreign to most people. It's going to be very hard to get them across the line on that, but that's the environment we're in. That's what works. And the last part is ownership and sort of stakeholder management, and it sort of comes down to who we work for and what we do it for, and that is clearly funding's an important issue for us. I'm pleased to say that on 2 occasions now we've got support funding from Napier and Hastings to support what we're doing, and the Big Easy was one of those, the television commercial was another. So I see a slight breaking of the ice in terms of what we're pushing that very strongly. We believe that we need to have an integrated single tourism plan for Hawke's Bay, and that's what we've got there. We're continuing to work down that line. We do believe the way we'll get there is by building confidence in our partners, not by telling them they have to, and hopefully there's 2 examples of that recently. Continue to encourage people within the region to value the visitor economy and its economic contribution. And obviously we need a local communication strategy that develops that. So this is the key things that we'll be involved at just over this next 12 months. That was sort of the 3-year picture, but we'll be targeting domestic visitors, continuing to push regional events, technology. We'll have a plan for China, which I look forward to sharing with you, and we'll be on the case of future funding and talking to you all about that. So that really brings us to the end of the presentation. I'd just say thanks very much for all the support we've received from this council over the last nearly 2 years. It's been critical in what we've been able to do, and without it you would not have a Hawke's Bay Tourism Organisation, I can assure you. So thank you for that, we really appreciate it, and we're doing our best to make sure that your trust in us is well deserved. Kia ora, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hecton and Ms. Dundas. I'm going to open for questions, but I'm going to just get a question in first. How many people have actually, like myself, got one of those T-shirts with Visitor from Hawke's Bay? Because I certainly found it very useful when I was in Europe the last 2 times to have that. And I'm just wondering how well it is being understood that they can do that.
I think we've probably distributed 200 or 300 around the traps, and then people often come in and they purchase them off us, and they can buy them off the Facebook page. But it is something we need to give another good push to and revive it a little bit, because it's been a fun campaign, and I think Hawke's Bay, we're sending off some boys from Lindisfarne to wear them around Europe on the school trip coming up. So hopefully we'll get them promoting and posting on Facebook in front of iconic locations.
I just think the personal touch does help. It's a good conversation starter among people. Thank you. Right, open to questions. Councillor Dick, Councillor Scott, Councillor Remersvale. And Rose.
Thanks very much for your presentation. A couple of questions. The measure of visitor spend, which that's a new one for you, isn't it? Where's it collected from? What's the data source?
It's the regional tourism indicators. It's credit card data. It's BNZ credit card data. It's 20% of all credit card transactions taken.
How do they know that they are visitors?
Based on their origin of address.
I see.
Yeah.
As compared where the money's spent.
Yeah.
And the money is that that includes retail as well as.
It does. The actual. It's broken down into accommodation, food and beverage services, retail sales for fuel, other tourism products, and other passenger transport.
Okay. And you say that you're developing a monthly dashboard of relevant statistics which will give a stronger indication. So you're working on some
Yeah, we're just finalising.
rationalisation.
Yeah, we're trying to make it a little easier. We do a quarterly research report,
Yeah.
but actually it's a fairly heavy document, and we need to perhaps have some, a top-line one-page research results each month that looks at all the factors of the visitor economy.
Okay, and possibly a bit of simplification.
Yeah.
Yeah. The growth from the domestic tourism since 2008 being a baseline, are those figures inflation adjusted?
I'm not sure, Ellen. That 2008 is based on the most sort of normal year, according to MB.
Yeah.
So that's why they've picked that year as an average.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to know in due course. And perhaps just finally, the sort of crunchy question. Your critics focus on the relevance and impact of the brand and have a view that Napier should be more prominent, and they say that, for example, you don't go and visit Canterbury, you visit Christchurch, that sort of thing. Now, you are funded on a levy which we collect across the region, so clearly you've got a responsibility to market the region. But where elements of the region have perhaps greater competitive advantage, how are you able, if you're able at all, to promote using sub-brands and that sort of thing? In other words, is Napier, the name Napier, anathema and shouldn't be used anywhere?
Not at all, and I think our video content shows exactly that we've picked off the fact that we have created some differentiation across the region.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one of the things that we need to consider as well is the consumer, and we've just had a group of international travel buyers into Hawke's Bay, and asking them how they sell the region or Napier, and we've had that discussion.
Yeah.
And they see the sum of its parts. So, I think, and it depends on the markets as well. If we've got first-time international visitors, Napier is singularly the most unique thing about this region. But if you've got domestic visitors that have been here and come regularly, they're looking for more than just Napier.
Yeah.
And, one of the most visited attractions in this region is the Hawke's Bay Farmers Market.
Yes.
So I think it just depends a little on which way we go. And Napier's a huge part of what we do. I mean, we talk about Napier a lot, and it's in all of our communications and often the hero in much of our advertising. So we're not promoting Napier, we're starting with Hawke's Bay, and I think if you look at a bit like a paddock and a drafting gate, well, Hawke's Bay is the paddock, and we've got various gates, and we channel people into whichever where they want to go, depending on the types of experiences they're after.
Could I just also add a little bit of that, Councillor Dick? Because the other side of that question really is, should you just promote Napier in order to do the marketing job for the region, and that would do it? And in my firm view, that would be incredibly counterproductive and would result in us... I hardly think Hastings would be very happy with the idea, but and I'll give you an example from another region. Wellington, which has a very strong pulling card, doesn't have enough on its own to represent itself and make itself attractive to visitors. It uses the regions around it very, very strongly, and for a while they even marketed the top of the South Island, a thing called Centre Stage. And the reason for that is that Wellington as a city is a very vibrant place. It's my home, but it does not have enough points of difference for someone to come solely to Wellington. They'll come to Wellington because it's got things around it. People will come to Napier as long as they understand it's got things around it. You absolutely need the diversity of Hawke's Bay to add to Napier. But I reinforce what Annie says. Napier features strongly, even on the front cover of this planner here. So it gets its profile, but the suggestion that goes with that is you work off this core of just Napier, and everything else will fold out from that. And in my view, that would be an unmitigated disaster for the promotion of this region.
Councillor Scott.
Madam Chair, I've got a number of questions, so I'm going to roll three into one. The visitor spend index that you showed us, which is slightly updated, is the one we've got in the plan. You referred to a blip being the
Rugby World Cup.
Rugby World Cup. However, from what I can see of my graph, it's blipping just about as much this year, so there must be something driving that. The other thing I noticed from it is how far above the national trend
The
it
average
is.
line's 100.
It's still above the national trend though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this region appears to be doing quite well with visitor spend. And I've got two questions around that, or three actually. One is perhaps you can explain what drove the increased spending this summer, but also you've referred to the number of members. What's your target, and how do you get to all those other people that are swinging on the back of it, like homestays, like the letting of private houses and all of those, which is quite a large market, I know. And secondly, looking at the commercial accommodation figures, are you working with the industry to change their target and their packages and whatever else they do? Because this is about change and meeting a different market, isn't it? So are they on board with looking at how they're changing with their approach, with how they package themselves, with appealing to a new market?
Yep, definitely. So I'll start with the first one. So the increase in spend, and we're actually getting, the more we get into the spend model, and there's a next round of information that's coming out which is related to how that spend is broken down. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is that a lot of the increase has been in other passenger transport, which relates directly to cruise. So obviously the cost of people on coaches, etc. Accommodation spend has dropped slightly, and so we've seen obviously where people have spent their money, which is not so much in the accommodation space, but more so in that retail and other passenger transport. And that, that with the numbers that we've had from the eyesight, the aquarium, operators at the Amazing Maze have had their best summer since 2009. That sort of tells us that experiences are being used, and passenger transport, etc., is up, which is good news. Secondly, capturing private accommodation and the holiday home market's quite tough. We've just been through an exercise of trying to gather their email data and their contact information as part of our industry survey. So we have managed to get quite a few on the books as a result of that. I'm not sure how much more there is in there for people to pay $550 above $200. I think when Wine Country was at its height in the website listings on our site, we got to about $240. So I think that sort of mark seems about right. But we are looking at some alternative funding models for next year, and we're going to do a little bit more work on that, and then have a chat to the industry and see how they feel about how we might change that a little bit.
Do you have a membership? Do you have a sort of an associated member or
some
other
there's
form
a
of
full member, and then there's a support partner membership, which is about $300 to join. And then lastly, working with the industry, what we know is that we're those that have joined and work with us. We are starting to see some change, and we're trying some new things. So we've had a series of properties that did some particular work for their business over the summer period, and they've seen really good results. So we're happy to engage on that front and to see how we can help, but people have to ask, and we really we have an open door policy. Anyone can come in and talk about their business and see how we can help, and mostly people get quite a lot out of it rather than sitting and not engaging.
Councillor Remersval, then Councillor Rose, and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask about cycling conferences and Film Hawke's Bay. Firstly, how do you see things working within cycling tourism in Hawke's Bay at the moment? Have you got any suggestions about how networking could happen better?
We're in the midst of building a cycling plan, so the Regional Council and Hawke's Bay Tourism are working on that at the moment, and that's in line with NZCT, the national network, and with a series of pretty punchy objectives, and looking at how we, upskill and get capability working better for some of the cycle operators. One of the biggest, for an international seller, the biggest issue is commissionable product, and really we only have a handful of businesses in the cycle space that operate in that way. But that's not a bad thing because most regions haven't got any, so we're doing all right, and so therefore it's kind of pushed Hawke's Bay's profile up as an ideal cycling destination. One of the bigger pieces of the cycling puzzle is how bike friendly are we as a region. So we're looking at some workshops in a couple of months around, if you're an accommodation provider, are you providing room for bikes? Have you got bike racks? Is there secure lock-up? All those sorts of things so that, we do become known as a very friendly bike destination. And I think, we're halfway there, but we can always do better in that space.
Thank you. Secondly, as far as conferences go, and I guess conferences would be potentially something that could use a lot of, formal motel type accommodation and so on. Are you doing a lot of active work to, compete with other areas and getting more conferences in the Bay? Is there more potential to do that
There
here?
definitely is, and Anne Gregor, who's our new conference manager, is here, and she comes from a background in Rotorua in exactly this space, so Anne's contact network is pretty vast. She's already been involved in about 10 bids for conferences through the next 6 to 8 months, and we've won several, and we're waiting on others. So we are taking it far more actively, and Anne's certainly much more part of the national conference network to make sure we know. And now that we've got this tool as well, we are looking a little more serious about the conference space, which is good.
And lastly, how's your relationship going with Film Hawke's Bay, which also actively promotes Hawke's Bay as a film area?
We've got it's early days, maybe I'll say that. We've had, I think one of the teams had a meeting, but we certainly need to do more in that space, Councillor.
Councillor Rose, just before I say that, I just must mention, I don't know if you've been to see the movie Eternity, anyone? One of the amazing things about that are the scenes of
Hawke's Bay, yeah.
Very quiet though, nobody in the streets, just sombre. It's quite interesting. Anyway, that beside the point. Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for your presentation. Just a couple of questions. I just wondered if you could give us some comment on the figures on page 53 of our agenda, which is international visitors to New Zealand. And I noticed in February there was a substantial decline in the visitors to Central Hawke's Bay Wairoa, which was down 22%. I see they recovered for the year, which is down 5%. But just wondered if you could give us your opinion of why there was such a steep decline in that particular period.
I would say for Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa, they're a very small base of numbers. One of the issues in Central Hawke's Bay, I think, was the closure of the holiday park, so which closed before summer. And so there's obviously a lot of people that use that holiday park in Central Hawke's Bay, which I've had a chat to the promotions board, and that's where they feel, Mr. Councillor Gilbertson, you might know a little more about that, but it did close. One of the other issues for February was the Mission concert, and I think we did see the Mission was down in terms of numbers, and that certainly has had an impact on February arrivals for Hawke's Bay.